Welcome to Well Played Podcast, a podcast on all things playful and joyous in education. Well Played Podcast is part of the On Podcast Media Network. I'm your host, Michael Matera, sixth grade teacher, author, and speaker. Today we're in season 4, episode 18, and we have with us a wonderful, good friend of mine, John Meehan. And welcome, John, back to the show. You've been on quite a bit, but if you could give just a brief little introduction about yourself, that would be great.
Awesome, man. I'm John Meehan. So good to be back. I'm an English teacher and a high school instructional coach out here in Arlington, Virginia. And I wrote a book called Adrenaline Rush, which is all about game-changing student engagement inspired by theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms from the good folks at Dave Burgess Consulting, who brought to you Explore Like a Pirate.
It's true. We're like author brothers.
Yeah, I was out, like how I made a commercial for your book there. So like we can kind of, you don't have to brag about yourself. I'll say nice things about yours and then vice versa.
I really have enjoyed John. I got to actually read John's book ahead of time and write a nice little blurb for John's book. Is excellent book. So hopefully everybody picks that up. But enough glad handing, because we got to take some gloves off here. Actually, it's not, John and I aren't necessarily fighting. I shouldn't say that, but we're going to dig in. We maybe actually put gloves on, because I think we're going to put our hands in some ugly here. I really do. This is a dirty job. I cannot
wait. I will say it to any of your listeners, if you've ever had a chance to talk to Michael in person, he is exactly the same person you see on a podcast. He is so kind, so generous, so giving of his time, and usually so optimistic. Except this one thing. Ugh. And today he called me, he says, hey, I need someone to step in on the podcast. Do you have a thing that we could talk about? I'm like, I do, but I don't know if you're going to love it. And he's like, all right, so it's your show, Michael. I will let you dump it on your readers.
All right,
get down and dirty, brother.
So as John pointed out, he's like, the only time I've ever really heard you say you don't like something has been about Monopoly. And so we're going to dig into Monopoly, briefly discuss why, and get why we're going to try to unsuck this game. We're going to try to really make it better if we can. Our time parameters here is the show is typically 30 minutes, and I really could rant for 30 minutes. So that's going to be hard.
I'm going to cut it right here. And here's why we're doing this. I know this is like a little bit of navel gazing. Michael and I did an episode some time back, and we talked about The Legend of Zelda, which is my all-time favorite. Love it. And I could rant for 30 minutes on the starting screen alone. There's so much about that game that I just love. But I said, Michael, I love that we did a deep dive and said all of the lessons we can learn for our classroom from this great game. So why don't we take a game that we're not enjoying? Because there are times in our curriculum that you have to teach things that you don't enjoy. Whether you're talking about, like, I don't know, gerund phrases or dangling participles. There's nothing sexy or fun or exciting about that stuff. But could we take Monopoly as a case study in the game that everyone's played, but it seems like no one really enjoyed, and say, all right, if we as two professional educators can look at a game and say, well, that sucked, how do we unsuck Monopoly? Maybe we can use those same lessons in our own classrooms. I
like it. Monopoly, people, Monopoly. Like, they're just, I don't know if we want to try to make...
So I want to ask you, because it is your show, but to tee this up for you, you've played a lot of games. I say, like, behind me, I make it look like I have books. This is just pretend, I promise. But you have a lot of games in your house. When it comes to, like, the number of games you either have in your possession or your personal collection, it's well into the, a lot.
Look at him. 100? He doesn't, like, as an English teacher, he doesn't know a number that big.
I don't want to insult. Get your shots in now. We're going to say nice things about Monopoly. Go ahead. But
yes, I own lots of games. It's kind of a hobby, which I actually picked up as an adult. I mean, I played games as a kid, but not really like a ton. My family had the Monopoly game. We'd play it once in a while. And then, some card games with my family. I don't know. Then got into some video games in college. And then after college, kind of stopped both video games and cards and board games for the most part. Picked them back up. Absolutely love it. I have hundreds of board games now. Hundreds.
Do you own a copy of Monopoly at your house? Because before our call, you said, I'll do it, but I have to Google the Monopoly board.
I do not own a copy of Monopoly, and I want everyone to hear this. That does not mean send me a copy of Monopoly. Like, I do not need a million different copies of Monopoly. Hold on, I know your home address. In fact, I don't even need one copy of Monopoly.
Done. Fixed it. Nailed it. So why the strong feelings? Because you said you grew up playing Monopoly, and like in my house, we had it. It was always we played it usually on New Year's Eve, because it was a thing that guaranteed eat up 3 or 4 hours at a clip while you were waiting for the ball to drop. So like, if you have to keep the family alive and engaged, well, let's play a game, and a long game. No one's even really enjoying the game. It's just a thing to pass the time because you're waiting for your turn.
You know what else takes time? Like painting your entire living room. I'm not going to make my like family do that to use up 4 hours.
Ouch, man. Ouch. But I mean, but you don't have Baltic Avenue in your living room. Or I mean, I guess
Okay.
you could.
Okay. So like what I don't, well, one thing I got to tell you, owning hundreds of board games, not all of them age well. I mean, there's some that like I loved this game. So like Monopoly, I don't like at all. Let's be clear. But there are games that I truly, seriously, like it was top 25 for me 10 years ago. And then you play it now and you're like, there's been a lot of improvements in game mechanics, game design, where like that no longer is top 25. It's by no means Monopoly. But but like games, there is like I don't know, an evolution in game design. And like with that evolution, sometimes you can really see the age of a game.
I want to pause your vitriol there because it's good, and I want to give in to your anger. Your dark side will lead you back to the
look
fort.
at this. I feel like this is your show today.
No, man, I'm turning you to the dark side, and I'm so excited about it. I cannot wait.
For those of you catching the video, you can see I'm smiling through it all.
But it's one of those this hurts kind of smiles. So like the pain that comes from that is a lesson number one for teachers. That lesson plan that was good 5 years ago, that was good 10 years ago, sometimes it needs to go. Like, I remember I was on a call earlier today and someone was talking about Apples to Apples. Loved Apples to Apples. It was a great game. One of the first games I played that gave me the chance to make up the rules as we went. Hey, that's cool. It's a very, like, new sports, new games kind of thing, like Play Under the Parachute or Earthball, right? There's no losers. Everyone just has a chance to play, and that's wonderful. Unfortunately, it sort of inspired generations of successors to that. And I thought about, like, a game like Cards Against Humanity. That the shock value, you play it for the first time, you're like, wow, this is really offensive, but it says it's a card game for horrible people, and you put it in its own little spot. But it has not aged well, and to the point where we're talking about things like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, racism, sexism, George Floyd protests. I'm like, hey, even making light of just because we're all in on the joke, maybe that's not a joke we should make anymore. And certain things, even if they were in my top 20 when I was 20 years old, maybe they need to go. Yeah. And I think that's okay, giving yourself permission to say this thing, just because it was my thing. You have a mind. It's for changing. You should not do the same lesson plan 20 years in a row, even if it was great 20 years ago, constantly being aware of, hey, there are new mechanics, there are new engagement metrics. So I agree with you. Even though Monopoly does have like the biggest spot at the table, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's above, criticism or self-reflection.
100%. And I like your point about like taking that ethos into our sort of lesson design, Just because you loved a lesson or a unit 10 years ago doesn't mean it works that way. Like either you have to be evolving that lesson and that unit with all the new things, just pulling it off and saying, hey, well, this unit's been great. And I think about, for me, I've always done my Olympic unit. My Olympic unit is one my kids loved, and that's what got me into gamification really in general.
Right.
But even that unit, I don't just do what I did 10 years ago. Like that unit has evolved. I mean, definitely that theme has been used. Some of the core structures have been used, but I have updated that unit in terms of pedagogy as well as game design.
So I will ask you again to like get back into that anger, but I want to talk about updating and evolutions because there's been a million evolutions of Monopoly, which is pretty much the same thing. But now
that is not an evolution. That is a change of clothes, my friend. That is a change of clothes.
It is a new coat of paint. I agree. But they have the new Cheaters Edition Monopoly, and if you haven't played Cheaters Edition Monopoly, it comes with a set of handcuffs, and you're literally handcuffed to the board if you are caught cheating. But you're encouraged to cheat. Like, for example, you roll the dice and you got a 10. Encourage you to try to get away with moving your car 10 spaces. Just kidding, 11 spaces instead. Or when you are the banker, can you steal for yourself $50 extra? Little things to skim off the top because it was things everyone was doing already, and it adds a new mechanic.
What is happening at the Meehan house that everyone's doing that already?
Oh, come on, really?
Maybe you guys should paint the living room.
Maybe that would have been a little bit more zen. But I mean, I don't know. There's maybe I feel like Goofus and Gallant here. At my family's household, everyone was like, talk about that Bartle test. The griefer type, the people who play to like just snipe the other guys and knock them out of the game, that player versus player mayhem, like Fortnite or Mario Kart, the guy who throws the turtle shells, that for our family was a lot of fun. It's three boys coming up and like we're fighting with each other, even for, like there's nothing at stake. We just like fighting. So Monopoly, the only way to fight was really to get lucky with the dice. The strategy, though, And that idea of we'll try to do a little bit of player versus player. Now that's an evolution mechanic, and that's an exciting thing because then if you get caught, then you're handcuffed and you're in jail, right? You're not allowed to roll the dice or whatever it is. I like that as a twist on a familiar classic that says, okay, let's add a little bit of mayhem. Let's add a bit of player versus player. So it's not just luck and it's not just math. Instead, there's a little bit of interaction. And even as somebody who's, the socializer type, to laugh at dumb things we're doing together, that's fun. I just picked up a game called Poetry for Neanderthals, and it's exactly that. You try to be a single syllable sentence to explain what the card is, not unlike Apples to Apples or Taboo. But if you mess up, the guy next to you has an inflatable club and he gets to whack you with it. That's fun, because you don't take it seriously. So I think that as an evolution, that's more than a change of clothes. And I think that Monopoly, over 180 years, has maybe started to learn a few things about that.
Okay, I'm gonna venture forward. I will answer your question there.
Let's go. Yeah.
But I do think we have to venture forward first on just saying Monopoly, because that is the thing that everyone owns, the Monopoly. And when I said change of clothes, I'm talking about how probably about 10 years ago they started licensing Monopoly out to everything. So and they didn't really change the mechanics. It was just they replaced Boardwalk with Pebble Beach for the golf edition, right? And then put a golf theme, pasted.
Or even worse, the Mickey Mouse version or the Fortnite version or the Legend
so
of Zelda.
Those are what I was saying is change of clothes. They didn't really update mechanics on that. They just sold out their brand to everything else.
Ouch. Okay.
You got me on the dark side, man. I
know, man. I know. So why? So give in to your anger, young.
Okay.
Man, right?
So Monopoly, I'm going to tell you, if a game design wise, why it's not very good. One, I have to move forward with the assumption we are actually playing by the rules, but most people don't, as you pointed out. And in some ways, the way we don't play makes it even worse. So we can get to that in a sec. But one, I really argue that you don't play Monopoly. Monopoly plays you, and I'm not trying to be cheeky here, but let's break down a turn.
Let's go.
I'm thinking, I'm a strategy guy. I like to think through my options. Okay, what are my options? I don't know. I guess I have to pick up the dice. That's my option. I'm gonna roll those dice. Oh, I wanted a 8, but I rolled a 6, and so I'm gonna go to Baltic Ave or whatever. That's not what I wanted to buy, but the entire point of this game is to buy property so that you can leverage that property. So whether I want to buy Baltic or not, I should buy Baltic. That is statistically proven. You land on a property, you should buy it. Whether it was part of your strategy or not, buy it. So okay, I didn't get to decide what to do. I didn't get to decide how to move. I knew that what I wanted to do, but I have zero control over that. I landed where I didn't want. And truly, if you're thinking statistically speaking, your only option is buy it, even if you don't want to buy it. Then it's okay, I've built my empire. I've got what is the other one? Baltic Ave and Mediterranean, I think.
Yeah.
So all right, I got both. I got the Monopoly. All right. Now my strategy is I'm going to charge you guys. I don't get to decide my rates. I have zero control over making you land on those spaces. I can't set any sort of trap. I can't pay into some advertising where it's you think this is the greatest motel to stop at because I've paid some advertising dollars. Nope. I'm at the same mercy that you're just going to roll a 6 and hopefully land on my spot.
Yeah.
So the only workable strategies in that game, which I'd still argue you don't have a tremendous amount of control over. The one is you should buy the orange properties. They are the most valuable properties in the game.
Right, statistically, because there's a there's the get out of jail free cards that it puts you back on that street, and then there's a Connecticut S card that will put you on St. James Place. Yeah.
Over time, you're gonna that's gonna pay out more than owning Boardwalk and Park Place. But again, you don't have control over that. I could start the game saying I know statistically speaking orange best, and I could never land on them in the buy rounds. So, and then the other strategy, and this only works if you're playing with the actual rules. You could go with a house strategy in which if you keep 4 houses on your properties and don't upgrade to hotels.
Yeah.
Because the rules state you need a 5th house. You actually buy the 5th house.
The 5th house makes it the hotel. Right.
Makes it the hotel. And if you keep all the houses, and assuming some other people are building houses, there will not be enough houses to go into hotels.
Correct, because there's a finite number of houses, and so what you're doing is you're like squatting on all of the pieces, not letting them be used at other places on the board.
Right. But like that again, that's not really a ton of strategy when I might not even I've spent
Hoarding.
whole games not even having Monopoly. So it's like I know I want to go with the strat of holding houses, but I don't even have Monopoly. Like I'm sitting here with one of this, one of that.
So I think to take this back to the classroom, then, like, there's a great Bernard Suits quote from the 1960s. He says, "All play is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles." That's what great games are. And the only obstacle Monopoly is okay, we're going to play Monopoly. Now Monopoly itself becomes the obstacle because there's no volition at a certain point, right? Like, it is the dice that's rolling everything. And if the dice don't roll it, it's the card that says, now go to St. James Place, now go back through spaces. There's no strategy in letting the math decide it for you. When you look at Monopoly, it's really not Candyland. I've often said that you don't play Candyland, Candyland plays you in the exact same way. Because that game is, all those cards are sorted in the beginning, you then just draw those cards in order and do whatever the cards
You know what's better about Candyland, though, John?
Lord Licorice?
I do like licorice. But I got to say the difference for me in terms of my level of dislike, one, Candyland is clearly marketed at little kids. Like, we'll do anything for a little kid. But, like, yes. Monopoly's legitimately, like, we could be at the cabin with a room full of adults, and I have hundreds of games that are way better. And they're like, let's piss away 4 hours on this crap game.
Well, here's my thought about Monopoly, and I want to talk about this because back to the lesson plan piece of it. Like, so many teachers, when I'm on conference calls, when I'm leading trainings or speaking or, like, going to schools before COVID, like, and even now in a virtual element where people are doing dial-in office hours, hey, how can I bring more playful engagement in my classrooms? I'll talk about things like theme parks, mud runs, escape rooms, which is kind of my brand, like the dopamine, the adrenaline firing, the pleasure centers in your brain to feel that sense of just throwing your arms up. Woohoo, I got this. And I was like, it's like any game you ever played as a kid. They're like, I'm not a gamer. And the first thing they say is, I mean, like Monopoly, but it was never really much. I'm like, well, you were playing the wrong game. Monopoly is a game.
You agree, John. You agree.
I do not disagree with you that Monopoly, and it's marketed in an inauthentic way because Candyland is a game that teaches you about turn taking and colors. That's what Candyland is designed to do. You get to go to Grandma Nut's house or Princess Frostine's house, who used to be Queen Frostine, but then they rebranded it.
You know way too much about Candyland.
You worry about yourself, Michael. But the dark side is powerful, but it also rocks. It has the force lightning. But so Candyland is designed for kids, right? And this is a thing that you'll just do as 4-year-olds. For littles, fine. We trick people into saying you've earned the right to play big boy games, and now they play a big boy game like Monopoly. And the first game they play, I mean, you love cooking. If you force kids to have vegetables and they just don't like vegetables, and you just sit there and say, eat your veggies, they're going to grow up hating vegetables and never come back to those because they've been forced to have them before they were ready. And what winds up happening is Monopoly is forcing down people's, throats a game with no choice. There's no consent. And I think that's so powerful a lesson for teachers in the classroom that says, don't force kids to do stuff. Give them meaningful choices, autonomy, ways to discover their own sense of mastery, their own sense of purpose. And if they want to create house rules that have a little bit of mischief or a little bit of exploration, encourage and facilitate those things. So I agree that Monopoly is like the perfect case study of the bad game. And it's up to us to figure out how to make it less bad, because there's some things in our classes that are just like, well, everyone has to do work, but we don't have to do it the same way where we're just waiting for our turn to sit there and say, I just did what everyone else did. There's no joy to that. There's no excitement. There's no love.
Yeah. So when I consult and work with, districts, one of the things I want to talk about is like, we don't have to play this game, right? So, because you just said there, like, it's our job sometimes to sort of fix the game, right? And like, well, sometimes when you have big shoes to fill, the best way to fill them is change the shoe, just right, and know when to cut it out. And like, both you and I are educators that definitely are PD junkies. We love to learn and love to try new things, which means we're constantly evolving, which on some level means you are, on some level, not wholesale, but you are abandoning some older pedagogy. Like, you cannot actually do with fidelity like too many pedagogies at the same time.
And I will point out that Monopoly, before it was stolen by Hasbro and everybody else, it was originally designed by, like, I think it was a housewife in New Jersey. Maybe I'm making this up. but it was designed to be a thing to teach people about the evils of monopolies and the evils of capitalism. It was
Correct.
then co-opted into a thing. So like even the story of Monopoly's origin stories is, oh, a monopoly came in and crushed the little guy who was trying to actually use it for an instructional
It was
purpose.
supposed to be a teaching tool to like be anti big business so that the
Yes.
average American would see that like unchecked wealth is like a bad thing. See how it's terrible for the workers. See how John, he's just trying to drive his little car, but he keeps landing on my properties because I own them all. Because by the end of the game, there's one person, if you truly played it out, who's got all the money.
And that's another problem with this game too, is I think people think about traditional games as elimination games, like, oh, a game like Survivor. There's only one the strong can survive. So one by one, everyone else is wiped out. And in Monopoly, it's 4 hours later and it's just you and your brother, even though you know mathematically he's going to beat you, just waiting to go around and just prolong the inevitable. Your sister's been eliminated, your aunt's been eliminated, your uncle, your cousin. And it's just not fun at a certain point because that spends more time on the bench than in the game. So again, like lesson planning trick or tip number 3, if you're unsucking a game, you have to maximize the time in the game and minimize the time on the bench. I think Hope and Wade King talk about that concept in their book, The Wild Card. And I love that as a concept. It says, hey, no more winner loser games. Rather, it has to be games that we all play together and that sense of joy and collaboration. And so many of those new, like European model games, like, Settlers or Pandemic, it's about like, even if it's not your turn, you're constantly watching how people are playing because the board is moving and shifting at every space.
Yeah, like definitely. I mean, a lot of the great games, they don't necessarily remove, like they don't have player elimination, like you said, that you'll play all the way out to the end. Uh, Settlers of Catan, good example. Like you can't, there actually isn't war in there. So if I built a house, even if it's my only house, like there's no way you can get rid of it. Like I will be in the game. The other thing that they realized is, like think you're an English teacher, right? So a book, like to be a good book, a good editor is taking out all the unnecessary, leaving that pure sense, right? But like the guy that wrote the book, the woman that wrote the book, like they loved to write, they loved their world, so they probably put in extra paragraphs here, extra chapters here. But really, like the editor's like, yeah, like I got lost on this and I didn't care about that, and so the good book got edited down to this piece. And I feel like Monopoly is a good example of, again, older game design where it was just like, hey, they're playing a game. This was made in a time when there was no Netflix, there was no there was nothing to compete for your time. So it was like, yeah, let's make a 6-hour game where you actually don't have to make a lot of choices. But like good game design now realizes, kind of playing on your bench time sort of idea here, is even if there is bench time, even if I have some great games that there is player elimination, but the games that have player elimination have it, they've like mathematically worked it out that like 99 out of 100 times you don't die until it's like 20 minutes left in the game or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It depends on the length of the game. Like if it
Right.
is a 3-hour game, you might only be out for the last 15 minutes. Like that, I don't really count that as player elimination.
So I want to talk about that too, because like in a classroom, games like Kahoot and games like Jeopardy are like old school, even though they're technology. They're still old school in their design, which is there's one winner and then everybody else is the loser. And very quickly, kids who fall out of that mathematically feel like there's no way to get back in. So they just start spamming for points. They're just pushing buttons to buzz in.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I'm going to pause there just because I do often say in my trainings, like using Kahoot, like think about why you're using Kahoot and maybe build your own game around Kahoot. And definitely for sure, please stop using Kahoot as like an assessment. Because as John's pointed out, the gamer inside a kid will tell them the only way to catch up is to be the one that gets the full 1,000 points. So I'm just going to hit, like the moment that it comes around, I'm going to just hit blue and hope that blue's the right answer. Well, but then you as the teacher are going to say, wow, he doesn't know anything. Well, I stopped even reading the questions, but I just...
And I think that's what I mean. Like I think the Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons talk about is like a rubber banding mechanism, like to catch you back up, even though you're falling out of it. Good games have that rubber band that say Mario Kart. Like even if you're out, you're never really out. If you fall back in the pack, there's a way to get back in. And so imagine if you could unsuck Monopoly and okay, you have a special power attached to your piece. Every time you make it around the board, you get to refresh your power. Maybe the car gets to move an extra space. or the hat gets to, I don't know, re-roll a dice or whatever that looks like.
This gets into teachers that are using gamification and are designing games. These are called asynchronous powers, and they are awesome game design elements. But it also it's one of the higher level game design to do because it's got the greatest chance of breaking the game, right? Like John's like move one extra space. Maybe right now that sounds simple. Maybe that sounds underpowered to you. But when we actually play it and we actually start to do the math on it, it's like, oh my gosh, you know how many times one space away would have made you not go to jail, or would have made you get that good property, or stopped you from having to pay me thousands of dollars because you could go one extra space? Like, maybe that's super powerful. Or maybe maybe needs to use it on every roll and it doesn't matter.
But that's the answer too, is if there's a sunk cost that says, look, this is a sinking ship already, let's just build a new game. I think it's to your point about Kahoot. We're not saying set up a new software. We're not. At least I don't think you're saying that.
I'm not advocating set up a new software.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying use the spirit of that playful learning that makes Kahoot engaging. Oh, it's teams. There's some choice. There's some like competition. There's a little bit of like, throw the other guy under the bus. See who can be the fastest. But don't just design a game that's like straight ableism, right? Who's the fastest in all things? Because there's students who learn at different paces. So give them the opportunity of choice and volition. And I think that learning from even bad examples, like misexamples. Hey, Monopoly kind of sucks sometimes. Teaching gerunds and participial phrases isn't so fun. What can I borrow against? What can I lean on and say, I want this thing to always be accessible for all students? And that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of thought. But those old games, those old lesson plans, sometimes they just need to go.
Yeah, 100%. And also, like, the thing that we can learn, this isn't going to necessarily unsuck Monopoly, but like life lessons learned, or lessons for the classroom learned from Monopoly, is all games. I should say, maybe not all games, but most games. The mechanics they built, the world they built, will eventually fall apart. Like it would, all the games that I'm saying that I have that I love, all my top 100, at some point would break if you like doubled their time, if you tripled their time. Some would break if you literally added one more round of the game. It would get too wonky. Like some of the like higher powers you can buy at the end, kind of the hotels of these new games, get way too super powered. Whereas like if you played for 5 extra rounds, it would break the game. So one thing game designers have realized is the tightness of the game, the length of the game, and making it interesting that you have growth. That I started and I couldn't do anything, just like Monopoly. I started, I had nothing. I had my little car, my little top hat, but eventually I bought a few properties. I traded a few things. Oh, I own a railroad, right? And then you start, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better. But like they've condensed that and paced it correctly for that. And one of the things I want us to think about when we build our units, sometimes we love something. So we're like sometimes we pick the Monopoly for our kids and we're like, this is the greatest game ever. We're going to do like a 7-week unit on like paragraphing. And kids are like, ugh, like 7 weeks on paragraph? Like, no way, but like you love it. So like, no, like be that good game designer, edit it down and choose that right length of time and have enough things happening, like John's saying about agency, so they're making meaningful choices. They're feeling that growth. Like that is such a good hit of dopamine when you have that system where you didn't start with something. Now you can do a little more. Oh my gosh, if I get one more thing, I could do a lot more. Holy cow, you get that end game bonus where you're like, I now make $1 bajillion every time this happens. That's so awesome. It only is going to happen once or twice before the game ends because that thing would be too overpowered. But like that right time length is huge.
I completely agree. And to the end of that, I would just say, I think Monica Cornetti had taught me the phrase about self-hugging, and that bad game design is just like giving yourself a hug. Like, the goal is never to give yourself a hug. The goal is to welcome other people in with open arms.
100%.
And so don't do that thing that's like patting yourself on the back. Oh, this will be so clever. 7 weeks. And then our utilities will be paragraph A, B. Kids are done.
Yep.
It's not about you. It's not about your ego. It never was. It's about bringing people in.
Yeah. 100%. So John and I definitely didn't unsuck Monopoly, but we did use it as a nice like little backdrop case study. I'm going to put a challenge out to the community though. If you want John and I to actually sit down and maybe do an episode where we unsuck Monopoly, leave it in the YouTube comments. This is season 4, episode 18. You can find it on YouTube. If we get, I don't know, I usually get like 2 comments on those things, 1 comment on those things. So I'm going to say if I get 5. If I get 5 people,
5.
and that does not include John writing in.
All right. Well,
6
what
if John writes a comment. 6 if John writes a comment. We will do this episode. I guess
I'll do even one better. I will mail you a copy of Monopoly to your house.
No,
sir.
I expressly said anybody does that, buddy. That's like.
Then I'm out. I'm out.
All no dice. All right. We do have to end on a sort of quote of the day here. We got a little. We got a good one. Obviously, it's about Monopoly.
Okay.
This one is by Eminem. I've never had him be quoted on my show before, but let's go with it. It says, man. I'm standing on my Monopoly board, and that means I'm on top of my game.
Oof. So, Michael, as an English teacher, what I'll point out there is the possessive use of the word my. Eminem is even saying in the way that Monopoly is his game, there's choice, there's ownership, there's volition there. And I think so many people, Monopoly is just the game that they've been forced to play. But once you choose it, that's very, very different. So I'm all about Slim Shady. And if he's standing on it and it's his game, I will play gladly.
I just love the quote is, I guess I'm picturing sort of like a statue, right? Like if he's on top of the game, literally, physically, I'm kind of assuming he won the game, so he's on top of his game. I just like the doubleness there. That was good. And there was a lot of negative Monopoly quotes, just so you know, when I looked them up. There's a ton, because the game itself.
Oh, my God.
There's a lot to work on there. All right, John, thank you so much for coming on. Well played. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I just have a great time every time.
You bet, buddy. Take care of yourself, everybody. Thank you.
Yep, everybody, you have a great day, and I want you to go out there, enjoy the day, and play on.